I never thought I'd end up in a war with my HOA president over a space heater. But that's exactly what happened when Brenda Morrison decided she had authority over every single aspect of my life at Pinewood Gardens in Phoenix, Arizona. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning in late November when I woke up shivering in my own apartment. I'm Ethan Thompson, 29 years old, and I'd been renting this two-bedroom unit for about 8 months. The place was decent enough, part of a sprawling complex with about 200 units, all governed by an HOA that seemed to have more rules than the actual state of Arizona. My landlord, Marcus Chen, was a reasonable guy who owned 3 properties in the complex. He'd always been easy to work with, never hassled me about minor things, and generally stayed out of my way as long as I paid rent on time. That particular morning, I realized my central heating wasn't working properly. The thermostat showed 72 degrees, but my apartment felt more like 55. I called maintenance, and they told me they'd get someone out within 3 to 5 business days. 3 to 5 business days of freezing my tail off wasn't going to work for me, especially with overnight temperatures in Phoenix dropping into the 40s. I drove to Target that afternoon and picked up a decent space heater for about $60. Nothing fancy, just a standard ceramic heater with a thermostat and safety features. I set it up in my living room, then moved it to my bedroom at night. Problem solved, or so I thought. 2 days later, I came home from my job at a software development company to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart jumped into my throat because I knew I'd locked it that morning. I pushed the door open carefully, half expecting to find the place ransacked, but everything looked normal. Too normal, actually. It took me a few minutes to realize what was missing. My space heater was gone. I checked every room twice, thinking maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. Nope, someone had definitely taken it. I immediately called the non-emergency police line to report the theft, and an officer came out about 2 hours later. Officer Rodriguez was a middle-aged guy with tired eyes who'd probably seen everything Phoenix had to offer. "Any signs of forced entry?" he asked, examining my door frame. "No, and that's what's weird. The door was locked when I left this morning. I'm sure of it. Who has keys to your apartment?" "Me, my landlord, and I guess the management office for emergencies." Officer Rodriguez wrote everything down and took photos of my door and lock. "I'll file a report, but I gotta be honest with you, Mr. Thompson. These small theft cases are hard to solve unless we have clear evidence or the item turns up somewhere obvious. Keep an eye out at pawn shops and online marketplaces." After he left, I called Marcus to let him know what happened. He sounded genuinely concerned and promised to check with the management office about whether anyone had accessed my unit. 20 minutes later, he called me back. "Ethan, this is really strange. According to the log, Brenda Morrison from the HOA used her master key to enter your apartment yesterday afternoon for an inspection." "What inspection? Nobody told me about any inspection." "That's what I'm saying. There was nothing scheduled." "I'm calling her right now to find out what's going on." I bought another space heater that evening, this time a slightly nicer model for $75. I wasn't going to freeze while waiting for central heating repairs that apparently weren't a priority. I also set up my old laptop in the corner of my living room, angled toward the door, with webcam recording software running. If someone was coming into my apartment without permission, I wanted proof. The next morning, I got a knock on my door at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Brenda Morrison standing there with her arms crossed. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that specific haircut that had become a meme online, the kind that seemed to demand to speak to managers everywhere. She wore a purple blazer over a white blouse and had a clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you about your violation of HOA regulations." "Good morning to you too," I said, not bothering to hide my irritation. "What violation?" "The use of unauthorized heating devices in your unit. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our HOA guidelines, residents are not permitted to use space heaters due to fire safety concerns." I stared at her for a long moment. "Did you steal my space heater?" "I confiscated contraband equipment that violated our community standards. You'll receive a formal notice in the mail. You can't just break into my apartment and take my property. That's theft. I have authority granted by the HOA charter to enter any unit for safety inspections." The space heater presented a fire hazard. "My central heating is broken. What am I supposed to do, Freeze? Submit a maintenance request through proper channels?" I did. "They said 3 to 5 business days." Brenda's expression didn't soften even slightly. "That's not my concern. The rules exist for everyone's safety. If I catch another space heater in your unit, you'll face fines of $100 per day until it's removed." She turned and walked away before I could respond. I stood there in my doorway, absolutely furious. I called Marcus immediately and told him everything. "She admitted to taking it." Marcus sounded incredulous. "She called it confiscating contraband." "Marcus, this is insane. She can't do this." "No, she definitely can't. I'm the property owner, and the HOA doesn't have authority to enter units for random inspections without proper notice to me first. I'm going to the HOA board meeting tonight. This is way out of line." I spent the day at work barely able to concentrate. My coworker, Dave, noticed me staring blankly at my screen during lunch. "You good, man? You look like someone ran over your dog." "My HOA president stole my space heater and threatened me with fines if I get another one." Dave laughed, then realized I was serious. "Wait, what? That's crazy." "Can she do that?" "According to her, yes. According to reality, no. HOAs are the worst, man. My parents dealt with one that tried to fine them for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox." "Beige? There are like 50 shades of beige." Despite Brenda's threats, I set up my new space heater that evening. I also made sure my laptop was recording with a clear view of the door. If she came back, I'd have video evidence of her entering without permission. Marcus called me around 9 p.m. after the HOA board meeting. He sounded exhausted. "Ethan, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that 3 out of 5 board members agree Brenda overstepped her authority. The bad news is that Brenda is insisting she acted within her rights and she's not backing down. She also claimed at the meeting that she returned your space heater to the management office for you to pick up." "That's a lie. Nobody contacted me about picking anything up." "I know. I already checked with the office. There's no space heater there." "But now she's saying she returned it, so it's your word against hers. This is unbelievable. I'm documenting everything. If she enters your apartment again without proper notice and my permission, I want you to call the police immediately." What she did is trespassing and theft, HOA president or not. The next 2 weeks were relatively quiet. My central heating finally got repaired, so I didn't need the space heater as urgently, but I kept it plugged in on low in my bedroom because the apartment's heating was uneven. The living room would be fine, but my bedroom stayed cold. During this time, I noticed Brenda driving through the parking lot more often than seemed normal, always slowing down near my building. Once, I caught her staring up at my window. It was creepy and unsettling. I started documenting every sighting with photos on my phone, just in case I needed evidence of harassment. December arrived, and with it came an unusual cold snap for Phoenix. Temperatures dropped into the 30s at night, and everyone in the complex was running their heaters constantly. My space heater became essential again because my bedroom would turn into an icebox after sunset, even with the central heating running full blast. On December 10th, I came home to find my door ajar again. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open and immediately saw that my space heater was gone. But this time, I had video evidence. I pulled up the recording on my laptop and watched Brenda Morrison unlock my door at 2:15 p.m., walk directly to my bedroom, unplug the space heater and carry it out. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. I saved the video file in 3 different places, then called the police. Officer Rodriguez came out again, and this time I had something to show him. "That's definitely trespassing and theft," he said after watching the video. "I'll need a copy of this file." "We can press charges if you want to pursue it." "Absolutely, I want to pursue it. Even against an HOA president. These cases can get messy. She'll probably claim she had authority. She doesn't. My landlord already confirmed that. She's just stealing my property." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "All right. I'll file the report and pass it to detectives. They'll likely want to talk to you and your landlord. In the meantime, I'd recommend changing your locks." "Can I do that? It's a rental." "With your landlord's permission. Given the circumstances, I think he'd agree." Marcus gave permission immediately when I called him. He also said he was going to send Brenda a formal cease and desist letter from his attorney. This is beyond ridiculous now. She's committed an actual crime and I'm not letting it slide. I had a locksmith come out the next morning and install a new deadbolt. I gave 1 key to Marcus and kept the other 2 for myself. I also bought a 3rd space heater, because apparently I was in some kind of absurd space heater arms race with a middle-aged HOA tyrant. 2 days later, I received a formal notice from the HOA in my mailbox. It was printed on official letterhead and signed by Brenda Morrison. The notice stated that I was in violation of community standards for unauthorized lock changes and for continued use of prohibited heating devices. I was being fined $500, due within 30 days. I photographed the notice and sent it to Marcus immediately. He called me 5 minutes later, absolutely livid. "How does she even know you changed the locks and got another space heater?" "I don't know. Maybe she tried to get in again and couldn't." "This is harassment. I'm escalating this to my attorney today. We're going to shut this down." That evening, I got a call from Detective Sarah Phillips from the Phoenix Police Department. She wanted to meet with me to discuss the theft case. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment the next afternoon. Detective Phillips was in her early 40s, professional and direct. She reviewed my video evidence on her laptop and took detailed notes while I explained the entire situation, starting from the first space heater theft. "This is pretty clear-cut," she said. "I've already spoken with your landlord, who confirmed he never authorized these entries. Miss Morrison doesn't have legal authority to enter your apartment and remove your property, regardless of HOA rules. HOA regulations don't supersede property rights and theft laws. So, what happens now? I'm going to bring charges of theft and trespassing against Miss Morrison. Given that there are 2 separate incidents and she was warned after the first one, this isn't going to be dismissed easily. You'll probably need to testify if it goes to court. I'm fine with that. I just want her to stop breaking into my apartment. The charges should accomplish that. Once she's formally charged, she'll have to appear in court. That tends to make people reconsider their actions." I left the coffee shop feeling vindicated but also anxious. I'd never been involved in anything like this before. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature. I just wanted to live peacefully in my apartment without someone stealing my stuff. The next week crawled by. I kept expecting something else to happen, but everything stayed quiet. I later learned that Detective Phillips had gone to Brenda's house to question her, and Brenda had apparently refused to answer questions without an attorney present, which was her right but also made her look guilty as hell. Marcus kept me updated on the legal side. His attorney had sent the cease and desist letter, and the HOA board had called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. 3 board members voted to suspend Brenda's access to the master keys, pending investigation of the theft allegations. Brenda and one other board member, her friend Patricia, voted against it. Brenda was furious. According to Marcus's sources on the board, on December 20th, something unexpected happened. Marcus called me at work, his voice tight with anger. "Ethan, I need to ask you something. Have you been running your space heater constantly for the past 3 weeks? Not constantly, but pretty regularly. My bedroom gets really cold at night. Why? I just got the utility bill for your unit. The electricity usage is almost 3 times higher than normal. I'm talking about an extra $400 worth of electricity." My heart sank. That doesn't make sense. Space heaters use electricity, but not that much. I have a decent model with a thermostat. It cycles on and off. That's what I thought too. Something's not right here. Can I come over tonight to check your apartment? Of course. I get home around 6:30. Marcus showed up at 7 p.m. with an electrician friend named Robert. They spent about 45 minutes checking my apartment's electrical system, outlets, and appliances. I showed them my space heater and how I'd been using it. "This heater shouldn't cause that kind of spike," Robert said, examining it. "It's rated at 1,500 watts. Even if you ran it 24/7 for a month, we're talking maybe an extra $150, not $400. So what's causing it?" I asked. "I don't know. Let me check the meter outside." We followed Robert outside to the bank of electric meters serving my building. Each meter had a unit number labeled on it. Robert pointed to mine, and we all watched the digital display. The numbers were cycling through kilowatt-hour usage, and Robert pulled out his phone to calculate. "Your current draw is really high for 7 p.m. when you're not running much. You've got some lights on, your refrigerator, probably your computer. That should be maybe 1 or 2 kilowatts. You're pulling almost 6. What does that mean?" "It means something in your apartment is drawing a lot of power, or—" Robert paused, looking at the meters more carefully, "or someone else is connected to your meter." "How is that possible?" "Electrical work done wrong, either accidentally or deliberately. Let me check something." Robert went to his truck and came back with a device that looked like a voltage tester. He went to the apartment directly above mine, which I knew was occupied by an older couple I'd seen a few times but never really talked to. He knocked on their door. A woman in her 70s answered. "Can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Robert Chen. I'm an electrician. I'm investigating some electrical issues in the building. Would you mind if I checked your breaker box real quick?" "I suppose that's fine. Is something wrong?" "Just routine checking, madam." We followed her inside. Her apartment had the same layout as mine, just mirrored. Robert located the breaker box in her hallway closet and opened it. He used his testing device on various circuits, checking readings and comparing them to what the breakers showed. "Everything looks normal here," he said. "Thank you for your time." We checked 2 more apartments in my building and everything seemed fine. Then Robert had another idea. "What about the apartment next to yours? Who lives there?" "I think it's vacant," I said. "I haven't seen anyone coming or going in months." Marcus checked his phone. "That unit is owned by the HOA. They use it for storage and sometimes as a temporary office space." Robert and Marcus exchanged a look. "We need to check that unit," Robert said. Marcus had a key since he was a property owner and board member. We went to the unit next to mine and Marcus unlocked the door. The apartment was mostly empty, with some folding tables, chairs, and boxes of HOA documents stacked around. But in the bedroom, we found something that made my blood boil: my space heaters. Both of them. Plugged in and running at full blast. The room was easily 90 degrees. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus said, staring at them. Robert checked the outlets with his tester. "These outlets are wired to the wrong breaker. This is connected to the apartment next door, connected to Ethan's meter. She's been running my stolen space heaters in here and making me pay for it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "That's why the bill spiked." Marcus pulled out his phone and took photos and video of everything. Robert documented the electrical issue. Then Marcus called Detective Phillips directly. She said she'd come out immediately. Detective Phillips arrived within 30 minutes, accompanied by Officer Rodriguez. We showed them everything, and Robert explained the electrical situation in detail. "So, Miss Morrison stole these heaters from Mr. Thompson's apartment, brought them to this HOA-owned unit, plugged them in. And because of faulty wiring, the electricity cost has been going to Mr. Thompson's utility bill," Detective Phillips summarized. "That's exactly what happened," Marcus confirmed. "And I have the utility bill showing the massive spike in usage starting right after the second heater was taken." Detective Phillips took more photos and had Robert write out a statement about the electrical findings. "This adds fraud to the charges. She's essentially stealing electricity by having it billed to Mr. Thompson. This is actually a more serious case now." "Can you arrest her tonight?" I asked. "We need to process everything and get a warrant. But yes, Miss Morrison will be arrested. This is beyond civil HOA disputes now. She's committed multiple crimes." The next 2 days felt surreal. Marcus had Robert fix the electrical issue so the HOA unit was on its own meter. I got my space heaters back, though at this point they felt like cursed objects. The central heating was working fine, so I unplugged them and put them in my closet. On December 22nd, Detective Phillips called to let me know that Brenda Morrison had been arrested that morning at her home. She'd been charged with 2 counts of theft, 2 counts of trespassing, and 1 count of utility fraud. She'd posted bail by afternoon, but was facing a court date in January. The HOA board held another emergency meeting that evening and voted 4-1 to remove Brenda as president, with only Patricia voting against it. Brenda's master key access was permanently revoked, and the board issued a formal apology to both Marcus and me. I thought that would be the end of it, but Brenda wasn't done yet. On Christmas Eve, I found a typed letter slipped under my door. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the formatting from previous HOA notices. The letter claimed I was a troublemaker who had fabricated evidence against an upstanding community leader. It said I'd regret destroying Brenda's reputation, and that I should move out of Pinewood Gardens before I caused more problems. The threatening tone was clear, even though no specific threats were made. I photographed the letter and sent it to Detective Phillips. She called me within an hour. "This is witness intimidation or harassment. Does anyone else in your building have security cameras that might have caught who delivered this?" "I don't know. I can ask around." "Please do. In the meantime, save that letter. Don't touch it more than you already have. It might have fingerprints." I spent Christmas Day calling neighbors and asking about security cameras. Most people didn't have any, but the couple directly across from me had a doorbell camera that faced the hallway. They were kind enough to check their footage, and we found exactly what we needed. At 11:30 p.m. on December 23rd, Brenda Morrison walked down our hallway and slipped an envelope under my door. The video was crystal clear, showing her face and actions in detail. Detective Phillips was thrilled when I sent her the footage. This woman just keeps making it worse for herself. I'll add harassment to the charges." New Year's came and went quietly. I spent it with friends, trying to put the whole mess out of my mind for one evening. It mostly worked. In early January, I received a subpoena to testify at Brenda's preliminary hearing. Marcus received one too. The hearing was scheduled for January 15th. The days leading up to the hearing were tense. I kept expecting Brenda to do something else crazy, but everything stayed quiet. I later learned that her attorney had advised her to have absolutely no contact with me or Marcus, advice she was apparently following for once. The preliminary hearing was held in a downtown Phoenix courthouse. I'd never been inside a courtroom before, except for a field trip in high school. The reality was less dramatic than TV made it seem, but also more nerve-wracking because it was actually happening to me. Brenda sat at the defense table with her attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s named Michelle Carter. Brenda looked diminished somehow, less imposing than when she'd stood in my doorway making threats. She wore a conservative gray suit and kept her eyes down. The prosecutor, David Martinez, was a young guy who looked fresh out of law school but spoke with surprising confidence. He called me to the stand first. I swore to tell the truth and sat down, very aware of Brenda's presence 15 feet away. Martinez walked me through the entire story, starting with the broken heating and ending with the discovery of the space heaters in the HOA unit. He played the video of Brenda entering my apartment on a large screen for the judge. "Mr. Thompson, at any point did you give Miss Morrison permission to enter your apartment?" Martinez asked. "No, never." "Did you give her permission to take your space heaters?" "No." "She took them without asking." "And when you discovered the space heaters in the HOA unit, running constantly and connected to your electric meter, what was your reaction?" "I was furious. She'd stolen my property, made me pay to run them, and then acted like she had every right to do it." Brenda's attorney cross-examined me, trying to establish that I'd violated HOA rules and that Brenda had acted in good faith to enforce community standards. I stuck to the facts, repeating that she had no legal authority to enter my apartment or take my property, regardless of HOA rules. Marcus testified next, explaining that he'd never authorized Brenda's entries and that the HOA charter didn't give her unilateral authority to access rental units. He brought the utility bills showing the dramatic spike in electricity usage. Robert, the electrician, testified about the wiring issue and how the space heaters in the HOA unit had been connected to my meter. His testimony was particularly damning because it showed intentional fraud, not just overzealous HOA enforcement. Detective Phillips testified about the investigation, the evidence collected, and the threatening letter delivered to my door. The doorbell camera footage was played, clearly showing Brenda delivering it. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Barbara Hayes, listened to everything with an impassive expression. After all testimony was completed, she took about 10 minutes to review her notes before speaking. "Miss Morrison, I'm binding you over for trial on all charges. The evidence presented today shows a pattern of behavior that goes well beyond HOA authority. You entered Mr. Thompson's apartment without authorization, removed his property, connected it to his electrical meter, and caused him to be billed for electricity you were using. That's theft and fraud. The threatening letter is harassment and witness intimidation. Bail will continue at current amounts, but you are ordered to have no contact whatsoever with Mr. Thompson or Mr. Chen. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said quietly, her first words of the hearing. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and I talked with David Martinez about what would happen next. The trial will probably be scheduled for late February or March. Martinez explained. She might take a plea deal before then. The evidence is pretty overwhelming, and taking this to trial is risky for her. What kind of sentence could she get? I asked. Depends on whether she pleads guilty or is convicted at trial. The theft charges are misdemeanors, but the fraud and harassment could bump things up. She's looking at possible jail time, definitely probation, fines, and restitution. She'll have to pay back the excess electricity costs and probably compensate you for the hassle and the stolen property. I just want her to stay away from me and stop breaking into my apartment, I said. The no-contact order should ensure that. If she violates it, she goes directly to jail. The next few weeks were blissfully uneventful. I fell back into my normal routine of work, hanging out with friends, and actually enjoying my apartment without constantly worrying about someone breaking in. The HOA board appointed a new interim president, a reasonable guy named Tom, who immediately started reviewing all the HOA regulations to identify which ones were outdated or overly restrictive. In late February, Martinez called to tell me that Brenda had accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to 2 counts of theft, 1 count of utility fraud, and 1 count of harassment. In exchange, the trespassing charges were dropped, and she received a sentence of 6 months in county jail with 4 months suspended, meaning she'd serve 60 days. She also got 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay restitution. The restitution amount was calculated based on the excess electricity costs, the cost of my space heaters, the locksmith fee, and a small amount for my time and stress. The total came to about $2,000, which Brenda had to pay within 90 days. She's also permanently banned from holding any HOA position, Martinez added. That was part of the plea agreement. She can't serve on any HOA board in Arizona. That seems appropriate, I said. The jail time starts next week. She'll be out in May with good behavior. I felt oddly hollow hearing the news. I'd wanted justice, and I got it, but the whole situation still felt absurd. A grown woman had gone to jail because she couldn't accept that HOA rules didn't override basic property rights and theft laws. Marcus called me that evening to share his own thoughts. I heard about the plea deal. How are you feeling? Honestly, relieved it's over, but also kind of sad. This whole thing was so unnecessary. That's Brenda for you. She could have just let you use a space heater while maintenance fixed your heating. Instead, she turned it into a federal case and ended up with a criminal record. You think the HOA will be better now? I hope so. Tom's already working on revising the rules. He wants to eliminate the stupid ones that just invite conflict. The space heater ban is first on the list to go. Good. Nobody should have to go through this. In March, I received a check for $2,000 from Brenda's attorney, the full restitution amount. I deposited it and tried to move on with my life. The whole experience had been exhausting and stressful, but at least it was truly over. April brought warmer weather, and I started using my apartment's small patio more often. I'd grill dinner sometimes, sit outside with a book, just enjoy the space I was paying for without drama. I never saw Brenda during this time, and I assumed she was serving her jail sentence. In early May, Tom from the HOA board knocked on my door one evening. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Ethan, I wanted to give you a heads up. Brenda's being released from jail next week. She's moving out of Pinewood Gardens entirely, sold her condo and everything. But I wanted you to know so you weren't surprised if you saw her around during the move. Thanks for telling me. I appreciate it. The board also wanted me to formally apologize again for everything that happened. We're implementing new oversight procedures so nothing like this can happen again. No board member will have unsupervised access to master keys, and all inspections have to be scheduled through property owners with proper notice. That sounds good, Tom. I'm glad something positive came out of this mess. We're also reimbursing you for your legal consultation fees. I know Marcus's attorney advised you to. Just send me the bills and we'll take care of it. True to Tom's warning, I saw a moving truck outside Brenda's building one Saturday in mid-May. I made sure to stay in my apartment that day, having no desire for a final confrontation. Through my window, I watched movers carrying boxes and furniture. At one point I saw Brenda herself, looking older and tired, directing the movers. She never looked toward my building. By evening the truck was gone, and so was Brenda Morrison. Life at Pinewood Gardens slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was infinitely more reasonable than the previous regime. They focused on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing social events, rather than policing every minor aspect of residents' lives. I renewed my lease when it came up in July. Marcus gave me a discount on rent, saying it was the least he could do after everything I'd been through. I didn't argue. The space heaters stayed in my closet unused. I'd bought a better blanket instead. One evening in August, I ran into Tom at the complex's pool. He was there with his kids, and we chatted while they swam. "How are things going with the HOA?" I asked. "Much better. We've revised about 30% of the old rules, eliminated another 20% entirely. Turns out a lot of them were unenforceable anyway or violated Arizona HOA laws. Brenda had just made them up over the years." "Seriously?" "Yeah, we had an attorney review everything and they found all sorts of problems. The space heater ban, for example, had no legal basis. HOAs can't prohibit reasonable safety equipment, and space heaters qualify if they are all listed and used properly. So all of this could have been avoided if someone had just checked the actual laws." "Exactly. That's why we now have quarterly legal reviews of our regulations. Costs a little money, but it's worth it to avoid situations like yours." I floated on my back in the water, looking up at the Arizona sky. The whole experience felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. But I knew I'd learned valuable lessons about standing up for myself, documenting everything, and not letting bullies run roughshod over basic rights, even when they had official titles. In September, I got a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. They'd investigated the HOA's practices following Brenda's conviction and found multiple violations of state HOA laws. Pinewood Gardens HOA was fined $15,000 and placed under monitoring for 2 years. The letter thanked me for my cooperation with their investigation. I never heard from or about Brenda Morrison again. I sometimes wondered if she understood how badly she'd derailed her own life over a $60 space heater. Probably not. People like Brenda rarely gained that kind of self-awareness. My life moved forward. I got a promotion at work in October, which came with a nice raise. I started dating someone I met through friends, a teacher named Rachel, who thought my HOA story was simultaneously hilarious and horrifying. My apartment remained my peaceful sanctuary, no longer invaded by petty tyrants with clipboards and misplaced authority. The following November, almost exactly a year after the whole mess started, my heating broke again. This time, maintenance came out the same day and fixed it within an hour. When I mentioned I had a backup space heater just in case, the maintenance guy laughed. "Yeah, I heard about what happened last year. Don't worry, man. The new HOA board doesn't care about space heaters. They care about actual problems like they should. I never had to use the backup heater." The heat worked perfectly. On a quiet evening in December, I sat on my patio with a beer, looking out at the complex. Kids were playing in the courtyard, people were walking their dogs, someone was grilling nearby, and the smell made my stomach rumble. It was peaceful and normal, exactly what community living should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus asking if I wanted to renew my lease for another year. I typed back a quick yes and went back to enjoying my evening. The whole saga of the stolen space heaters had taught me that sometimes standing your ground against unreasonable people was necessary, even when it was uncomfortable. That documentation and evidence mattered more than shouting. That the legal system, for all its flaws, could actually work when you had a clear-cut case of wrongdoing. And most importantly, that HOA presidents weren't immune to the law, no matter how much power they thought they had. Brenda Morrison had learned that lesson the hard way, spending 60 days in jail and earning a criminal record over her refusal to respect basic property rights. I'd learned my own lessons about tenant rights, the importance of security cameras, and the value of a good landlord who actually had your back. As winter settled over Phoenix and temperatures dropped into the comfortable 60s, I occasionally thought about that first morning when I'd woken up freezing and decided to buy a space heater. Such a simple, reasonable decision that had spiraled into months of conflict, theft, fraud, and eventually criminal charges. But sitting on my patio, warm and content in my apartment that was truly mine to control, I felt grateful for how everything had turned out. Brenda was gone, the HOA was functional, and I could use whatever heating devices I wanted without fear of someone breaking in to steal them. Sometimes justice took a while, but it was worth the wait. And sometimes the smallest battles, fought over the most mundane objects, revealed people's true characters. Brenda had revealed herself to be a petty tyrant willing to commit crimes to maintain her illusion of authority. I'd revealed myself to be someone who wouldn't be pushed around, even by someone with an official title and a clipboard. The space heaters remained in my closet, silent witnesses to one of the strangest chapters of my life. I'd probably never use them again, but I kept them anyway, partly as backups and partly as reminders. Reminders that standing up to bullies was worth it, that documentation was power, and that sometimes the most ordinary objects could become the center of extraordinary conflicts. Life at Pinewood Gardens continued peacefully. The HOA focused on maintaining property values and organizing community events rather than harassing residents over minor infractions. Tom proved to be an excellent president, balancing rules with reason. The board actually listened to residents' concerns and responded appropriately. I even joined the HOA board myself in February, figuring I might as well help shape policies rather than just complain about them. My first motion was to establish a formal grievance procedure for residents who felt unfairly targeted by HOA actions. It passed unanimously. The electrical system in my building was completely inspected and updated, fixing not just the issue with the HOA unit, but several other problems that had gone unnoticed for years. Several residents thanked me for inadvertently causing the inspection, as their own electrical issues were discovered and resolved. Marcus became a good friend beyond being my landlord. We'd grab beers sometimes and talk about everything from work to sports to his experiences managing rental properties. He told me he'd sold one of his other properties after dealing with a different nightmare HOA, making Pinewood Gardens his primary investment focus now that the board was functional. By spring, the whole incident felt like ancient history. New residents moved into the complex who'd never heard about the space heater war. Life moved on as it always does. But I never forgot the core lesson. Authorities are only legitimate when they operate within the law and respect people's rights. The moment they cross that line, they're just criminals with titles. And criminals, no matter their position, eventually face consequences. Brenda Morrison faced hers. I got my justice, my restitution, and most importantly, my peace of mind. The space heaters that started everything sat unused in my closet, but their impact rippled through Pinewood Gardens in ways that made life better for everyone. Sometimes the smallest things matter the most. Sometimes standing your ground over something as simple as a space heater is worth it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually works the way it's supposed to. As summer arrived and Phoenix temperatures soared into the hundreds, I was grateful for my working air conditioning and the knowledge that if it ever broke, I could use whatever cooling devices I needed without fear. The HOA's revised rules explicitly protected residents' rights to reasonable temperature control measures, a direct result of everything that had happened. I raised my beer in a silent toast to that first space heater, the innocent device that had accidentally exposed a tyrant and led to positive change for an entire community. Then, I went inside to my comfortable, climate-controlled apartment, secure in the knowledge that it was truly mine to control. The war was over. I'd won. And more importantly, everyone at Pinewood Gardens had won, freed from the petty tyranny that had governed them for too long. Sometimes it takes one person refusing to back down to create change. I was glad I'd been that person, even though I'd never wanted or expected the role. Life was good. The HOA was functional. Brenda Morrison was gone, hopefully learning from her mistakes, and I had a great story to tell at parties, complete with video evidence and a court verdict to back it up. In the end, that's all anyone could really ask for: justice, peace, and a warm apartment to come home to at night. I had all three, and a couple of unused space heaters in my closet as souvenirs from the strangest battle I'd ever fought. Sometimes you win wars you never wanted to fight. This was one of those times, and I was grateful for the outcome, even if I'd never wanted the conflict in the first place. The important thing was that when pushed, I pushed back. When my rights were violated, I stood up for them. And when a bully thought her title made her untouchable, I proved that the law applied to everyone equally. Those were lessons worth learning, even if the tuition was paid in stress, time, and 2 stolen space heaters. As I settled into my couch that evening, remote in hand and a movie queued up, I felt genuinely content. The saga was over, the lessons were learned, and life was exactly as peaceful as it should be. And if my heating ever broke again, I knew exactly what I'd do: buy a space heater, plug it in, and use it without fear. Because that was my right as a tenant, a resident, and a human being who deserved to be warm in his own home. No HOA president, no matter how power-hungry, could take that away from me again. The space heaters in my closet represented more than just the objects themselves. They represented the principle that ordinary people could stand up to authority when that authority overstepped its bounds. They represented the idea that documentation and evidence mattered in a world where truth was sometimes contested. They represented the reality that consequences existed for those who abused their power, no matter how small that power might seem. Most of all, they represented a simple truth. Sometimes doing the right thing meant fighting battles you never wanted, standing your ground when it would be easier to fold, and trusting that justice would eventually prevail if you held on long enough. I held on. Justice prevailed. And now I had peace, restitution, and a functioning HOA that actually served the community instead of terrorizing it. That was worth every moment of stress, every dollar spent on replacement heaters, and every hour spent documenting evidence and testifying in court. The story of the stolen space heaters would follow me for years, I knew. It would be the tale I told at dinner parties, the example I gave when people complained about their own HOAs, the proof that standing up to bullies actually worked sometimes. But more than that, it would be a reminder to myself that I was stronger than I thought, more resilient than I knew, and fully capable of fighting for what was right when the situation demanded it. Those were valuable lessons, worth far more than the cost of a few space heaters. As the Arizona sun set outside my window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt genuinely grateful for how everything had turned out. The path had been difficult, but the destination was worth it. Peace, justice, and the freedom to heat my apartment however I wanted, those were the real victories. And somewhere out there, hopefully, Brenda Morrison was learning that authority without legitimacy was just tyranny, and tyranny eventually faced consequences. Whether she actually learned that lesson or not wasn't my concern anymore. I'd done what I needed to do, stood up when I needed to stand, and came out the other side stronger and wiser. The space heaters could stay in the closet forever for all I cared. I didn't need them anymore. What I needed I already had. A home, peace of mind, and the knowledge that when pushed, I could push back effectively and win. That was enough. That was everything. And as I settled in for a quiet evening at home, I knew that whatever challenges came next in life, I'd face them with the same determination I'd shown during the Great Space Heater War of Pinewood Gardens. Because that's what you did when you discovered your own strength. You carried it forward into everything else. The end of one story was just the beginning of the rest of my life. Lived with a little more confidence, a lot more awareness of tenant rights, and the certain knowledge that justice, while sometimes slow, was ultimately available to those who pursued it properly. Brenda Morrison had stolen my space heaters. But in doing so, she'd given me something far more valuable, the proof that I could stand up for myself and win. That was a gift, even if she'd never intended it as one. And it was a gift I'd carry with me for the rest of my life, long after the space heaters themselves were forgotten.